I first noticed her the morning the rain leaked through the cafe window. The usual guy in the corner, the one with earbuds always half hanging out of his ears, wasn't there, and I ended up with the usual corner seat, the one that lets me watch without being obvious. She was at the counter, ordering something complicated. Something with oat milk, and a word I couldn't remember. She said it with a kind of precision that made the barista blink twice. When she turned, our eyes met for just a fraction longer than necessary. I looked down at my phone, pretending I had a message I needed to read, but I didn't. My thumb hovered over a text I never sent, the same one I'd drafted yesterday, the day before, probably last week too. Sometimes I wondered if I kept them there just to feel like I'd done something. She sat a few tables away, flipping through a worn notebook with the kind of calm that made the ticking clock on the wall seem louder. My coffee had gone cold. I stirred it anyway, watching the spoon cut through the surface like it could fix something about the world that felt off. She looked up, caught my eyes again, and this time she smiled just a little, just enough that it made my fingers curl against the mug. "Your usual?" she asked, nodding at my cup as if she remembered it from somewhere. I blinked. I didn't remember telling anyone, and yet there it was, her knowing. Yeah?" I said, fumbling with the sleeve. My hands felt too big in the too small paper cup. She tilted her head, the kind of tilt people give when they notice something, really notice it, without saying it out loud. I wanted to say something clever. Something that didn't make me sound like I'd been thinking about her for too long. But instead I just nodded, pretending I hadn't noticed the way she folded the corner of a napkin around her pen, like she was protecting it from the air, the world, from me. Then she laughed at something in her notebook. Not loud, not forced, just a quiet, even laugh that made me aware of my own silence. I wanted to hear it again. The cafe buzzed around us, the rain tapping, spoons clinking, the barista muttering under his breath. She didn't look at anyone else. Not the regulars. Not the delivery guy who came in soaked from the morning drizzle. Just me. Or maybe it felt like me. When she stood to leave, she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, glanced over her shoulder, and said something that lingered in the air between us. "You don't know what you're starting," she said. Her words were calm, matter-of-fact. Not a warning, not a tease, just a statement. And still, my chest twisted a little, the way it does when something both confuses and clarifies all at once. I wanted to ask what she meant, but my voice stuck behind my teeth. Instead, I watched her walk out into the rain, her coat clinging to her like it belonged to someone else. I sat there, stirring the cold coffee that didn't taste like anything anymore. My phone buzzed. A new message. I picked it up slowly, careful, almost afraid. The screen lit up with her name. And just like that, something shifted. Something I didn't have the words for yet, but I already knew. The next morning, I found her at the little bookstore near the station. She was crouched by the poetry section, running a finger along the spines like she could memorize them by touch. I lingered near the coffee table display, pretending to examine a book I had no interest in. "Did you like yesterday's rain?" she asked without looking up. I shrugged, adjusting my backpack strap. "I mean, it was fine. Calm, I guess." "You?" She smiled softly, pulling out a worn copy of Neruda. "I like the way it pauses everything. Makes small things feel bigger." Her voice had that same quiet certainty, like she didn't need me to answer. I nodded, though I didn't know exactly what she meant. Then, on impulse, I told her something I never say aloud. I used to come here when I couldn't sleep. Nights felt too long, so I'd wander the aisles and read things I didn't understand. Made me feel less invisible. She glanced at me, and for a moment, her eyes softened. "You still feel that way?" I looked down, fiddling with the strap of my bag, aware of how small my hands seemed. "Sometimes. Not always." There was a pause, a space filled only by the soft hum of the heater and the shuffle of pages. She closed the book, tucking it under her arm. "I get it," she said simply. "I do." I wanted to ask how much she got. But I didn't. Instead, I watched her trace the edge of the counter, fingers lingering over the chipped wood like she was memorizing its shape. She laughed quietly, almost to herself, and it made me imagine 100 scenarios I shouldn't be imagining. Us laughing like this in the rain, walking side by side to some cafe, sharing our quiet mornings, my thumb brushing against hers without meaning to. I felt the familiar twist in my chest, the one that made my hands clench and my words stall before they reached her. At the register, I picked up a tea she had recommended once, and she handed me a small tin of sugar, her fingers brushing mine ever so slightly. A contact so fleeting it might not have happened at all, but it stayed. "You're going to get lost in here if you're not careful," she said, smirking, and I laughed too softly. My voice felt too loud, yet too small. When we finally stepped outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. She paused at the curb, looking at the passing cars, and then at me. She adjusted her bag strap, her fingers brushing against mine again, not by accident this time, I was sure. And she said, almost under her breath, "I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me." I watched her walk ahead, the distance between us tangible yet charged. Something had shifted. Something quiet, but persistent, and entirely unsaid. She showed up at my apartment with a bag of pastries one Thursday evening. I wasn't expecting her, and the sudden knock made me stumble over my own words before I even opened the door. "Oh," I said. "Hey." My voice sounded too loud in the quiet hallway. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, holding the bag like it was an afterthought. Her eyes flicked past me, catching something in the apartment, books on the floor, a mug I'd forgotten to wash. I stepped aside, but my hands lingered near the doorframe longer than necessary. She walked in, and the smell of cinnamon and sugar mixed with the faint scent of rain clinging to her coat. I wanted to tell her to stay, but the words lodged somewhere behind my teeth. We sat on the couch, a careful distance between us, the bag of pastries between our knees. She reached for one, then hesitated, looking at me as if asking permission. I offered one without thinking, and our fingers brushed. Small, fleeting. My chest caught anyway. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but she was already speaking about a memory from work. A patient she'd helped years ago. She told it softly, almost to herself, but I caught the way she glanced at me when she said the words. Like she wanted me to understand something she couldn't say outright. I nodded, but inside I was spinning. Every word, every gesture felt like a test I didn't know I'd agreed to take. I thought about the text she sent the day before. About the look in her eyes in the bookstore. I wanted to reach for her hand again, or lean closer, but the weight of what might follow stopped me. And then the doorbell rang. A neighbor, maybe? I jumped up too quickly, knocking over the sugar tin. She laughed softly, and I noticed a faint blush on her cheeks. Something unspoken passed between us in that laugh, a quiet acknowledgement. I put the tin back on the table, my hands trembling slightly. She didn't comment. She just reached for her coat, adjusting it with the kind of care that made me want to freeze time. "You're leaving?" I asked, even though I didn't want her to answer. "I should," she said, voice even. She paused by the door, and for a moment, I thought she might turn around. Her eyes met mine, long enough to make the room feel smaller, warmer, closer than it should have been. I leaned forward just a fraction, my heart hammering, wanting, what exactly? I didn't have the words. She leaned slightly too, and the space between us shrank, almost impossibly. A bird cawed outside. The sound startled me, and I pulled back. She smiled faintly, a little wistful, like she understood without needing to say it. She left, closing the door softly behind her. My hands hovered over the handle, over the empty space where she'd been. I could still feel her warmth, the faint trace of her perfume. And I realized, just as the door clicked, that I hadn't moved for a long time, because I didn't want to. Didn't dare. We walked along the river that evening, the sky bruised with the last light of day. She had her hands tucked in her coat pockets. I kept my own fidgeting with the zipper of my jacket. Silence stretched between us in that way that feels heavier than words. "I saw him today," she said suddenly, nodding toward a group of joggers we passed. I didn't ask who, but I knew anyway. A quiet jealousy settled in my chest, unfamiliar and sharp. My stomach tightened. "Oh," I said too quietly. My words sounded small in the wide open space. She glanced at me, eyes soft but firm. "You didn't tell me you knew him." I shook my head. I wanted to say something, anything, that wouldn't betray the tension in my hands, the way my fingers tapped against each other as if that could push the feeling away. "I didn't think it mattered. Does it matter now?" she asked, letting her voice fall into the river's hum. She kicked at a small stone, sending it skipping across the water. I imagined it like our conversation, brief, fleeting, but leaving ripples anyway. I wanted to tell her I felt everything I'd never said. That I wanted to be closer, to touch her hand, to tell her she shouldn't worry, that I didn't care about him. But I stopped myself. The words lodged somewhere between my throat and my chest, heavy and warm. We reached the bench near the willow. She sat first, and I followed, careful not to sit too close, careful not to sit too far. I watched her hands fold into her lap, twisting a ring I hadn't noticed before. Something intimate, exposed, like she had let the world in for just a second and left me outside. "I think," she started, pausing, letting the sentence hang. My pulse picked up, waiting, expecting a confession or a retraction. She sighed softly, not looking at me. "I think I'm afraid. Afraid of losing control." Her words pressed against the quiet like the tide against the shore. I didn't answer. I didn't move. Just watched her, feeling something I didn't know how to name. Desire? Fear? Both at once. "I don't know if I should feel this way," she whispered, more to herself than me. The willow leaves shivered above, brushing against one another in a quiet, knowing rustle. I reached toward the back of the bench, almost touching her hand. Almost. My fingers hovered, trembling slightly. The air between us felt combustible, fragile, and impossibly still. Her gaze lifted to me, searching, steady. I opened my mouth. Closed it again. And then the world narrowed to that single heartbeat, the question unspoken, hanging, do we dare cross the line? I couldn't answer. She didn't answer. The river carried on beneath us, indifferent, patient, like it always knew what we were too scared to say. The next week felt different. I went to the cafe at the usual time, the corner seat waiting for me like it always did. She wasn't there. Not just late, gone. I waited longer than I usually would, stirring my coffee slowly, watching the rain smear the window into abstract shapes. Then came the messages. Not from her, not yet. Just the ones I didn't send, drafted and deleted like practice runs for feelings I couldn't properly frame. She called one evening, voice clipped, polite. "I can't tomorrow. Something came up." That was all. I didn't ask what, though I imagined every possibility. Some ex, maybe, or a child I didn't know about, or some responsibility that didn't fit neatly into the moments we'd carved out. I tried to text her, a simple, "Are you okay?" But my thumb hovered over send. I erased it, then typed again, "I miss you today." Deleted. Drafts piled up like unopened letters. The following day, I passed her on the street. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and chose not to. Her pace was brisk, coat tight around her, hair tucked behind her ears. I wanted to call out, wave, anything, but my feet stayed rooted, and she disappeared around the corner, leaving only the faint echo of perfume and unfinished conversation. I imagined all the things that could have caused this pullback. Did she regret the small closeness we'd shared on the bench? Did she fear how quickly the quiet intimacy had grown between us? Or was it something else entirely, something I wasn't supposed to see? At night, I found myself replaying our small gestures, the brush of fingers over sugar tins, the shared glance in the bookstore, the almost touch on the river bench, and feeling the absence of them like a weight pressing on my chest. Not heartbreak, exactly. More like a pause, the world holding its breath in some cruel way. I went back to the cafe again, 2 days later. Her usual table was empty. The barista asked if I wanted her order saved for her, and I shook my head. My stomach tightened, my fingers clutching the cup like it could anchor me. I left without looking back. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets were slick and reflective, mirroring the sky, my own uncertainty. My phone buzzed once, probably a notification. Not from her. I imagined the message that might have come, then deleted the thought. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the drafts folder, at the unsent messages that felt like confessions or cries or questions I wasn't brave enough to finish. And I realized, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The seat she would have taken beside me remained empty, the coffee cold, my chest aching with the weight of waiting. Not for an ending, not even a beginning, just for a continuation that might never come. She showed up at my door that evening without knocking, or maybe I just wasn't listening for it. The hallway light cast shadows across her face, soft but unreadable. I wanted to ask why she came, or if she'd even come for me, but the words stopped halfway. "I thought I should see you," she said, voice low. The bag she carried sagged at her side, not like she had something to give me, but like she had carried herself here through some internal weight. I stepped aside, silent, letting her in. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee I hadn't finished, the rain outside soft against the windows. She set the bag down on the counter, then didn't move. Just stood, letting the quiet stretch, like she was testing it, and me, too. I wanted to reach for her hand. I wanted to close the space, but fear and habit and all the small what-ifs hung between us like dust in the air. "I've been thinking," she began, and I didn't interrupt, even though my pulse sped up. "About what this is, what it's been to me." Her fingers curled around the edge of the counter, knuckles white. She was fragile in a way that made me ache, but not in a way that needed words. I nodded, though I didn't know if I understood, not fully. Instead, I offered her the stool by the counter. She sat. I leaned against the opposite side, our knees brushing almost imperceptibly. The brush lasted long enough to feel, short enough to respect the space we both needed. I was afraid," she said finally, voice softer. "Afraid that I'd lose myself. Or pull you into something you shouldn't." I shook my head, words finding me at last. "I already knew. And I still want this. Or at least, want you." My voice faltered, trailing off like a sentence I couldn't finish. Her eyes met mine. Not searching, not pleading, just steady, quiet. And something broke inside me, the tension I hadn't known I'd been holding. I leaned slightly closer, careful, aware of the space between us, and she didn't pull away. We didn't speak for a long time. The kettle whistled somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed, and the streetlights outside streaked the walls with a gentle orange glow. Finally, she let out a slow breath, as if deciding to let some part of the fear go. "Okay," she said softly. No flourish. No declaration. Just okay. I nodded. "Okay," I echoed, almost a whisper, almost a promise. Her hand brushed mine again as she reached for a mug. Longer this time. A connection so small, so ordinary, it carried everything we hadn't said, all the tension, all the waiting, all the quiet longing. We stayed like that for a while, silent, close, fragile, whole in the moment. And I realized then, more than anything else, it wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up. It was about being here. It was okay. Morning light leaked through the blinds at exactly 8:47 a.m., just like it always did. I sat at the small kitchen table, black coffee in hand, the steam curling like it had a rhythm of its own. She appeared in the doorway, hair tucked behind her ear, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Morning," she said softly, voice still carrying the hushed weight of yesterday's small confessions. "Morning," I replied, eyes on my cup, watching the ripple where I'd stirred in cream. We didn't need more words than that. The kitchen held the quiet we both liked, the space that didn't demand anything spectacular, just presence. Later, we walked to the river, the bench waiting as if it had always known we'd return. She sat first, folding her hands in her lap, the notebook she'd carried for years now resting against her side. I followed, placing my mug on the railing, feeling the familiar warmth in my chest. We didn't rush to fill the silence. The occasional bird call, the distant hum of traffic, the faint rustle of leaves, all of it was enough. I glanced at her and noticed the small gestures that had become part of our quiet routine. The way she'd twist the ring on her finger when thinking, the subtle lift of her eyebrows when she had something unsaid. I reached for my tea, and she offered me sugar, still our small ritual. Fingers brushed for the briefest moment, longer than it used to be, but still careful, intentional. I watched her take a sip, then look out over the water, and I realized how ordinary and extraordinary this felt at the same time. We talked about mundane things, the weather, a stray dog we'd seen near the cafe, a book she was rereading. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, nothing that demanded a climax. And yet I felt the depth of us in every glance, every pause, every unfinished sentence we left hanging between us. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. Coffee cooled. I noticed the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear, the same way she had on our first meeting at the cafe, the way our hands occasionally met when passing sugar or tea. Small touchstones of a love that had grown quietly, patiently, without fanfare. At one point, she sighed and leaned back, eyes soft. "I like this," she said. "I like just this." I nodded, letting the words settle. "Me too," I said. Not loud, not dramatic. Just true. And later, when she left the bench to check her notebook, I stayed a moment longer, watching the light catch her hair, the quiet rhythm of her breathing as she read. I thought about the coffee we'd shared, the benches, the rain, the near touches and almost confessions, and I smiled. A soft, internal smile. Something only we would understand. Life wasn't perfect. Days still felt long sometimes. We still carried our separate fears, our routines, our small hesitations. But the pause was gone. The waiting ended. Presence replaced uncertainty. And in that ordinary, quiet way, it was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?